All
You
right,
ready?
thanks everybody for joining us today. I am Zach Ford. I am the chair of the Dusty Baker-Sacramento SABR chapter. We are very happy to have the CEO of SABR, Scott Bush, with us today. Marlene will give him a more thorough introduction later, but I did want to have a couple of reminders. Again, please mute yourself if you're not speaking. There will be opportunity to ask Scott some questions at the end. A couple of announcements. I actually talked to the Stockton ports earlier today. For those of you that went with us to the back porch area at that stadium a few years back, we had a good time. That's an option as well. So please shoot me an email or text or Facebook message or whatnot if you're interested in that. Also thinking about doing some River Cats games like we did a couple years too. So it's good after 2020 to hopefully by the end of the baseball season have some sort of normalcy where we're able to gather again, at least at baseball events outside. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Marlene, who will do some upcoming announcements and then eventually pass it over to Scott and Steve.
Hi, it's so good to see everybody. I keep, switching through these screens here to see you all. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed being able to do this. I'm with Perry. All the SABR Zoom events have certainly helped to keep me sane, and whatever else I could find online too. It's really nice to see faces. I did go to an in-person masked and socially distanced meeting the other day, and it was really weird because all I saw was the backs of heads. I kind of missed seeing people's faces, and this way I could see your smiles. So thank you all for making some time tonight to join us and for being good supporters of SABR. I wanted to tell you about some upcoming events. We've got June is going to be our Giants month. So on Tuesday, June the 1st at 7 p.m., Steve Treader, right there in the corner for me, Steve, is going to talk about his new book on Horace Stoneham, 40 Years a Giant. Really looking forward to hearing about Steve's work on this massive undertaking. Thank you, Steve, for doing this. And then on Saturday, June the 5th, I know we don't usually meet on Saturdays, and we don't usually meet at 10 in the morning, but our speaker, Lincoln Mitchell, is on the East Coast, and he is going to be talking about his new book called The Giants and Their City. Lincoln's joined us before, so you may be familiar with Lincoln. And you know that Steve Treader is our not so new anymore chapter co-chair for the Lefty O'Doul chapter, and he is going to do the honors with Scott Bush tonight. So thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Marlene, and thank you everybody for being here. They asked me to introduce Scott Bush, and I said I don't know Scott Bush. I don't know him well enough to introduce him. And it's true. We've never met in person. We've bumped into each other and some Zoom calls. But I was just thinking here for a minute before. The SABR, the organization, the SABR organization. It's just my observation. My observation as a member. It's grown so much stronger within the past few years. I don't know. It just seems to have gone through a down period and come back stronger. SABR seems to me to be really growing and thriving in a way it hasn't done in a long time. That's a great thing. That's a great thing for all of us baseball lovers. And it's obviously a reflection on the CEO we're about to introduce, Scott Bush. This organization doesn't just happen. It happens because of lots of people who do lots of hard work. It's the result of a lot of people really working hard, and nobody harder than the fellow at the top of the organization. So Scott Bush, please regale us. Thank you.
All right. Well, Steve, I really truly appreciate that. That's very kind. And to echo what Perry had to say, I'm very appreciative of everybody at the chapter level who has done so much work to make sure that we've got amazing programming for everybody to participate in. So I've got my screen up here. We're gonna roll through a little bit of a presentation here around minor league baseball and the reorganization that is now in the rear view, amazingly. And I'll do my best to stay on task and on time here, and we'll have some time for questions at the end and talk a little bit about some of the other programming that we've got planned for the balance of the summer with SABR. So before we get started now, no one unmute, no one use the chat, no one shout out an answer. I'm gonna have to retire this trivia question very soon because it's been making the rounds as I make the rounds within SABR. But at the end, I want to share this answer. I don't want you to Google it either, since everyone's probably at their computer. This is a fun little trivia question with an interesting story to it. What team drafted and signed Mike Lansing to his first professional contract? It's not an immediate and obvious answer, which is why it's fun trivia. So before we get into the good, the bad, and the ugly, we'll do a little bit of a crossover. Clint Eastwood and David Byrne. You look around and you say, this is not my beautiful minor leagues. How did we get here? So you go all the way back to 1903. And that was the point at which the National Association said, we've lost. We've lost to the American and National Leagues, and we will now operate as a separate entity from Major League Baseball. And at that point, they began operating what became to be known as the PBA, the Professional Baseball Agreement. Those agreements initially were established to govern the recognition of contracts and player movement. So the National Association was saying we can no longer afford to compete to sign the best players. But it is important that we still are able to sign players and for the American and National Leagues to recognize those contracts. And in fact, if you want those players, you will have to pay us compensation. So the agreement governed that relationship. And then as time passed, teams began to formalize relationships with minor league clubs on their own. So you started to see what would become affiliate agreements. And as we know, there were some more progressive clubs like the Dodgers and the Cardinals who said, you know what, let's have a lot of affiliates. A competitive advantage for us is going to be to have a lot of talent in our pipeline. So that there was that independence, and then there were those affiliations, and the independence waned a lot as we saw the golden age of minor league baseball really suffer due to television. There was a time when you couldn't drive to a small town in America without finding a minor league ball club. St. Cloud, Minnesota, I'm originally from Minnesota. St. Cloud, not a bustling metropolis, had a minor league baseball team. Lou Brock played there. And if you were to try to put a full season minor league team in St. Cloud, Minnesota today, I would say to you, good luck. And it's a much bigger town today than it was. But the reality is minor league baseball as a business is the same today as it was then. It was built around affordable family entertainment, and television became an option for families to stay home and not go out as a group to go to a ball game. So the clubs found themselves struggling financially, and Major League Baseball actually stepped in and said, well, you know, actually we can help. And they invented this concept called territory rights, which now we think of as a thing that big league clubs squabble over, whether it's in the Bay Area or as we saw with the prolonged disagreement between the Nats and the Orioles over Masson. It can occur over media rights, right? So today, we know it as a big league thing. At the time, territory rights were established as a way for big league clubs to compensate minor league clubs for the opportunity to play their games on the radio in their market, right? So it was, I'm the big league club. I would like to put my ball game on the radio over the airways, available in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and you, St. Cloud Rocks, are going to get paid for that. And as a result, what came out of that were PDCs, player development contracts. And that model has remained in place since we encountered it in the 50s or 60s. The last significant change to the PBA of any substance came in 1990. And at the time, minor league baseball was so convinced that they had been pantsed by Major League Baseball that they replaced their president. When in fact, what came about was one of the last great ballpark booms that we've seen in this country. If you look at the renovation date or the build date of a lot of minor league ballparks across the country, it is the mid 90s. And the reason for that was the PBA and the demand for facilities upgrades, which, spoiler alert, continues to be an issue. So we now know a lot about all the changes that have occurred. But what were they? Were they simply a frustration on the part of Major League Baseball, or were they a failure on the part of minor league baseball to address a known issue? And the answer most likely is somewhere in the middle. But here are some of the core issues. Player development contracts were short, 2 years. Those short-term PDCs left the parent clubs with very little leverage to improve the facilities where they had an affiliate, because if they wanted something, there's no guarantee that the team that was going to be there 2 years later would want the same thing. Meanwhile, the minor league baseball power structure really inhibited franchise movement and all but prevented franchises from changing levels of play. So an amazing example of this, which many of you are probably familiar with, occurred at the high A level with the Cal League. The Cal League had a pair of franchises that were in decaying facilities in High Desert and in Bakersfield. And ultimately, both of those franchises were purchased by Major League parent clubs, moved across the country to the Carolina League, where they now exist as the affiliates of the Astros and the Rangers. Because both of those clubs were so frustrated by the lack of facilities at that level that they said, you know what, we're just going to buy a team and we don't have to think about it. Minor league schedules, their travel arrangements, all-star games, all designed with business needs in mind rather than players. So that meant the student day or the YMCA day, that game is going to start at 10 a.m. and it might be the first game of a homestand. We're certainly not going to start a game early on Thursday because we're selling dollar beers. That's what we're doing promotionally. So it doesn't matter that we've got a 900-mile road trip that we're going to start at midnight. We're running this for the business, right? So these were all things that had been brought up before and were met with strict opposition from minor league baseball operators for obvious reasons. Meanwhile, Major League Baseball was also not receiving any revenue from minor league baseball operations, while the owners saw their counterparts in the NBA thriving off of revenues that they were seeing from the league-owned development league, National Basketball Development League. And finally, a question of how many players are necessary. And every club seemingly had their own answer to this, including your hometown A's and Giants, neither of whom had a rookie advanced league team recently. So they were stocking 5 levels of play. Other teams were doing 6. So what does all of this lead to? Well, it leads to the big change. So here are the new leagues. I'm sure and affiliations, I'm sure all of you have seen this, or at least tuned in to see what your parent club ended up doing. Along with this, you'll note gone are names that we've known for a very long time, such as the Pacific Coast League, the International League, the South Atlantic League, the Carolina League, and the Cal League. So, among others. So, with the change, what's good? There is some good. I think there's actually quite a bit of good in here. There's reduced travel. This is great for both the players and the operators. The operators are now busing half as much because we're going to play a 6-game homestand, which is an incredibly sensible thing to do for several reasons. One is the travel. 2 is you reduce the amount of getaway days that you have to worry about how much sleep guys are able to get. You also are able to schedule the league such that you can skip the worst day of the week to sell tickets, which historically is Mondays. Group tickets don't sell very well on Monday nights because most businesses don't want to take their employees out to kick off the week. Most of them don't want to go on Monday. So you find yourself skipping Monday home games. That's probably a net positive for the operator anyway, for a lot of operations, I should say. And we're also tighter geographically. A lot of the redrawn map means that the bus trips in general are much shorter. There's also a focus on facilities as they affect the players, which is good for baseball. Long-term affiliations, this is a net positive across the board. It's a net positive for the parent club because they can have a long-term relationship with their affiliate and spend time learning about what that facility needs and potentially partnering in those needs. Similarly, a parent club turnover was always a negative for the affiliate because what you ran into was if you changed every 2 years, the market that you were in would start to say, well, why aren't we good enough? What's wrong with our hometown? Fans start to look at it and go, well, boy, maybe something's wrong with our operation. Maybe I shouldn't be spending time at that ballpark. So it's a really good positive to be able to establish that relationship and say, look, we're a Royals affiliate for the next 10 years. We're a Rangers affiliate for the next 10 years. That matters. And then finally, there is increased marketing capacity here. Baseball Advanced Media is a really strong business operation. And for them to be behind these teams now moving forward, it is just more resources than they've had at the minor league baseball office in St. Petersburg. And there's also incentive built in for Major League Baseball in the form of the ticket tax. That was a tax that already existed. It used to go to St. Pete. Now it goes to Major League Baseball, but it gives them incentive. They also have the ability to sell in corporate partners. So again, shared incentive for some outcomes here. So seeing some questions I'm going to have to find. So Perry, great question. At one point, I did know who the minor league president was and who replaced him, but I didn't put it in there, so I can't remember. Name changes, Marlene. I think we'll get to that. And Tom speculates corporate sponsor names. Yes. Who would want to be a Rangers affiliate? Yeah, nonsensical. You're right. Okay. So the bad. So this unquestionably disrupts. Long-term affiliations and league partners. So you had a familiarity with the fact that if you were trying to think of some folks that got changed. Well, let's use a big one. If you were in Fresno, that market was accustomed to being a AAA market. They were accustomed to seeing AAA baseball. They were accustomed to seeing guys right before they debuted. They were accustomed to seeing Reno come into town. They're not accustomed to Class A baseball. They're not accustomed to seeing a guy before anyone knows he's a prospect. And they're not accustomed to Rancho Cucamonga coming to town, right? And no matter whether the change is ultimately positive or negative for Fresno, initially the perception is going to be that it's negative. And that perceived instability will, at a minimum, short-term, probably be negative for business. You've also got the potential to suddenly find yourself with a homogeneous product. where it used to be you go to a ballpark, the experience in Stockton is completely unique from the experience in Lake Elsinore. And you can repeat that across the country. When you start having the exact same ticketing vendors, the exact same corporate partners, this becomes sort of a one lane road. And things start to look a lot the same. The other, Major League Baseball now has the ability to work directly with municipalities to negotiate facility improvements. This is a detail of the agreement that has been reported. So, in other words, you have a lease. You are the tenant. You are responsible for paying rent to your municipality as the business operator. However, you now have a third-party partner who's privy to that relationship. And when it comes down to it, and you are working with your municipality on what needs to be done to improve the facility, as the operator, all of your improvements are going to be focused on fans because you can monetize those. You can find a return on investment on those if you are also investing in those improvements. Once Major League Baseball is involved in those, their focus is going to be entirely on facilities, right? So they're going to be thinking about things like, how big are the locker rooms? Have we added the nap room that the team wants to add? And that's a real thing, by the way. Space for players to take naps before games. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying it sounds very funny to say out loud. And when you think about a facility that was built in 1995 and up to 1995 standards, the opportunity to find the space to carve out for something like that is limited and ultimately going to be very expensive. But ultimately, improvements for players are the sorts of things that Major League Baseball is going to prioritize. So, the ugly. Yes, Perry, umpire nap room, absolutely. The ugly. Look, we now have 120 affiliated teams. There's really no way to position that as anything but ugly. We now are maximizing the number of players under a minor league contract at 180. There are replacement leagues that have been put in place. I think it's fair to initially be critical of whether or not they're viable. If you think about the Pioneer League and its footprint, a lot of travel that takes hours. So those trips are amongst the furthest in minor league baseball. Now, add to that, the markets are amongst the smallest. So those markets, really their success is driven by the ability to sell single game tickets to individuals and families. It's not driven by selling out the suites. It's not driven by corporate season ticket sales, right? And it's certainly not driven by sponsorships. So you're dealing with what is largely a marginal business operation to begin with. And now you are adding in overhead that they didn't previously have because they're going to pay the players, right? And they don't have a big partner that can assist them with some of maybe their capital needs, whether it's facilities improvements or otherwise. So in other words, I'm saying it's a tough road to go if you are the Pioneer League and going to independent baseball. Collegiate wood bat, different scenario. You're not taking on that advanced overhead. You're taking on a shorter schedule typically. So there's a lot less risk there, but I would expect that 3 years from now, the teams that we've seen come out of this, not all of them are going to be around. It's simply the nature of the beast. It's also a little bit ugly to see a reduction in the rounds in the draft. Of course, that is directly correlated to the number of players you can have under contract. So what happened in Northern California? You guys probably know all of this by heart, but I will share it anyway. So the A's are in Las Vegas, Midland, Lansing, and Stockton. Stockton is a switch down to low A, which is not that big of a move. The A's also swapped Beloit for Lansing. Beloit is staying in affiliated baseball, even though it's one of the smaller markets that you'll find. My understanding is they are building a new facility that will be online soon, and no short season team, which they have had in the past. It is interesting to me that Oakland ended up in the High A Central rather than the High A West. The High A West is made up of former Northwest League teams. So Oakland had not been in the Northwest League. No, they were in Tri-Cities. So it is interesting. Maybe at 10 years from now, when these agreements are up again, maybe they'll be moving from Lansing somewhere west. We'll see. The Giants, Sacramento, Richmond, Eugene, and actually my screen's cut off. Zach, what's the fourth affiliate?
San Jose.
San Jose. Oh yeah, of course, because they've always been with San Jose. So San Jose makes the drop to low A along with Stockton. They're swapping Augusta for Eugene from a travel for the front office staff perspective, going to scouting players, things like that. That's a net win, obviously, for the Giants, and no short season team. The interesting thing for me geographically for the Giants, they're in AA Northeast rather than AA Central, which is essentially the former Texas League. Richmond is of interest to any number of teams along the Eastern Seaboard as a AA affiliate, but the Giants must enjoy working with those operators because they chose to stay. Fresno, the big move that we referenced earlier, dropping from AAA to low A. But while we're here, the fun stuff, we're going to experiment a little bit, and this is something that I think could be really good. We'll see ultimately how this is used by Major League Baseball. But we're going to do some experiments this year. We're going to do some experiments in the future. AAA is going to see larger bases. They've also introduced a different surface on the base. As Perry can tell you, when they get wet, they are very slippery, potentially dangerous. So that's an interesting one. The base is going from 15 by 15 to 18 by 18 at AAA. AA, they're playing around a little bit with rules against the shift. So if you want to swing the infield around against a left-handed batter, you can do that. But they all have to have their feet on the dirt when the pitch is thrown. So you won't see the second baseman standing in shallow right field. He'll still be on the dirt. High A, every pickoff attempt, the pitcher must step off first before they give that a try. Low A, limit 2 pickoff attempts per plate appearance. So what we're seeing at the low A and high A levels really is incentivizing steals, which I find very interesting because I think you need to give these rule changes a chance to matriculate up, and therefore it would be most likely, at least to me, that the players that are doing it now are the most likely to take advantage of it in a few years when they're in the big leagues. We're also seeing a 15-second pitch clock in the low A West, which is San Jose, Stockton, Rancho Cucamonga, etc. And then the automated strike zone, low A Southeast. This is interesting. So far, low A Southeast, of all the low A leagues, fewer strikeouts than the other 2 low A leagues, more walks, and more runs. So if you are someone who doesn't like the preponderance of 3 true outcomes, walks, strikeouts, and home runs, this maybe doesn't do anything for you. But if you think about baseball right now and feel that there's a need to tilt things back towards the hitters a little bit, this is an interesting data point because more walks and fewer strikeouts does that. So something to keep an eye on for the rest of the season. and some potential implications there. So the trivia answer was the Miami Miracle. Did anybody get it? So when teams were still independent, but participating in affiliated leagues, they were allowed to participate in the Rule 4 draft. And Miami, owned by the ownership group that I used to work for, the Gold Claim Group, informed the commissioner's office of their intent to participate in the Rule 4 draft. And they went ahead. They went ahead and made 16 selections in the 91 draft, including Mike Lansing. And because he was a college senior, he was sort of obligated to sign. He was then sold to the Expos and matriculated his way the rest of the way to the big leagues. That loophole in the Rule 4 draft language was very quickly closed. And that was the first and final draft that the Miami Miracle participated in. So questions, I'm going to stop the share there. Questions on all that with minor league baseball?
Scott, do you have any insight or information concerning the umpires for the leagues that have been compressed or eliminated? It's kind of a mess from what I've been hearing. I was just wondering if you had any information you could share with us about that. Yeah,
and part of that mess is the league offices really do not exist any longer. The league offices were separate business entities, and that was part of sort of the strange hierarchy that minor league baseball had created. And it really is in contrast. Sorry, I'm going to meander here, Perry, and then I promise I'll answer the question.
No, please do.
It's really in contrast to what Major League Baseball did when Bud Selig eliminated the league offices. There were two separate league presidents for a very long time, and ultimately Major League Baseball just said we're Major League Baseball. Minor League Baseball, meanwhile, had leagues who operated on their own and thus were ultimately competing with one another. And that is what created so much of the friction and inability for these franchises to move locations and classification levels. And essentially, once you bought a AAA franchise, you were guaranteed to own a AAA franchise in perpetuity, which seems like an odd way to justify the value of a business. But that was the direction that they took. And so because those offices didn't operate within minor league baseball as an entity, there was really no reason to bring them into the fold when Major League Baseball took over operations. And in fact, that's what they did. They've created their own infrastructure to replace that within their offices in New York. And so as a result, you end up with these leagues that have been eliminated entirely, Perry. There's no longer anyone actually there to even call to talk to about what happens now, right? So yeah, there's really no path forward for those umpires except the opportunity to hopefully catch on inside of the rest of affiliated ball and be part of that infrastructure moving forward. But if
so is all of the umpire signing now being done by the schools or by Dusty Dellinger or something, or
that I don't know the answer to that actually.
Okay, thank you. I just feel so bad for all of them. I mean, I know a bunch of them that were waiting to find out if where they were going to be going just a few weeks ago. And I mean, that's been minor league baseball's habit to keep their umpires uninformed until the very last minute and treat them very shabbily. So I'm not surprised, but I am very concerned. Thanks.
So Scott, I had a question. Wasn't there player compensation issues involved with this as well?
So I would say yes and no. That was something. If you go back to the 2019 winter meetings, the scuttlebutt was a piece of legislation called the Save America's Pastime Act. And that was a creation of Major League Baseball and minor league baseball working together. And if you talk to the minor league baseball folks, they would say there was a gentleman's agreement between the two sides that if minor league baseball helped the lobbying effort to keep minor league baseball players as exempt employees from any sort of living wage legislation, then Major League Baseball would go ahead and essentially renew the PDA. And ultimately, the opposite happened. Well, I shouldn't say that. Minor League Baseball did what they felt was asked of them. And then Major League Baseball came out after that legislation was done and said, we're going to move forward with contraction. And there was a bit of this where you had some reporting about the idea that essentially the owners were taking the position of, well, if we're going to have to increase what we pay minor leaguers, then we'll simply have fewer minor leaguers. And I don't doubt that there were some owners that wanted to do this for that reason, but I don't get the impression that that was the driver for all of them. I think that a lot of the other factors that I laid out were much more important. So Steve had a question. What was the Players Association position relative to all this? I don't know the answer to that, but I think that's because I don't believe they ever came out with a statement because they don't represent anyone affected by this. For better or worse, that's simply the case. So I don't believe the PA ever took a side here.
What about the Astros taking the step of paying for players' accommodations during the season? Why isn't that a more widespread strategy? Why are only the Astros doing it? And how can we encourage other teams or Major League Baseball to implement that as a minor league-wide thing to do?
Yeah, so this is really interesting. So one additional side effect of COVID, no host families. So host families, particularly at the lower levels of minor league baseball, were a staple. It was a way to provide housing to players, but also give them the structured environment that they were likely coming from at 18, 19 years old. With the inability to provide host families this year, finding housing for 30, 18 to 21-year-olds in a small town and asking them to do it on their own, you're probably asking for problems. So it's interesting. The other thing that I would add, the draft this past year, the 2020 draft, was even more abridged than we're going to see in the future. And there's a benefit, and there was a cap on bonuses to undrafted players. So if you give them a max bonus, but you also promise them housing, now maybe you've actually created a bit of a competitive advantage over the other teams in the league. So should they do it for everybody? Yeah, I mean, why not, I guess, other than the expense, right? So if they can afford it, it seems like a sensible thing. And, you know, we've also seen teams increase their wages. The Blue Jays went ahead and did it last year. I think the Giants have already done it. And I would expect a lot of the teams will be doing that moving forward.
Thank you.
Scott,
they
could you
gonna
talk about
continue-
ownership? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask, are they going to continue with this extra inning rule thing of the runner on second base for no other reason than to have him on second base?
I think they're trying to help guys stay healthy. I don't know if you've seen the injured list lately, but
I have seen the injured list. I don't understand why, you know, guys are going to get injured regardless of whether they put them at second base in extra innings or not.
I think they're doing their best to avoid catastrophic arm injuries. And we'll see if they continue with it. Obviously, there's a massive collective bargaining agreement coming up this next offseason. That may become an item, you know, but certainly the 7-inning doubleheaders and the runner on second and extras are designed to limit the exertion of the players in a rough
But
season.
doesn't it put more
Pitchers.
pressure on pitchers in terms of, you know, if you're pitching in extra innings, right away it's a stress inning because you got to run on second base.
Mentally, sure. Physically, it beats pitching another 5. Marlene, you were going to ask something?
Yes, I don't know much about ownership of minor league baseball clubs. You worked with a group that own multiple clubs. Other clubs have single or small group ownership. Can you briefly chat about that?
Yeah, I've
Or is
not.
it a big-
I probably do a poor job of being brief with all of it. So there's ownership. Ownership at the minor league level is really a mirror of the major league level, just smaller scale.
Okay.
And so you see single entity owners, you see ownership groups, you see groups that own multiple franchises. The group that I worked for prior to coming to SABR, the Gold Claim Group, currently owns and operates the St. Paul Saints, the Charleston River Dogs, the Hudson Valley Renegades, and the Pittsfield Suns, which is a collegiate woodbat team. And the Saints prior to this year were an independent league team. They're now the AAA affiliate for the Twins. So that group had their their teams ran the gamut. Really was every type of team that you could have. Other groups like to focus on a certain size of operation. I actually worked in Stockton for a year. The ownership group there, 7th Inning Stretch, they primarily work with smaller clubs where they feel like their management style will immediately translate. But that's just sort of depends on who's involved and what they're interested in and what they think their strengths are.
Thank you.
So you're from the upper Midwest. Are the St. Paul Saints still going to have the pig come out from behind home plate now that they went to AAA?
They do still have the pig.
Oh, they do. Okay.
Yep, the pig is back.
All right. So all is not gone to hell then. Okay.
So is the, I had one question, is the, I thought I read somewhere, and I hope I read this right, but this whole reorganization is kind of part of the Manfred One Baseball concept. And what I didn't understand is what are the other components of One Baseball?
Yeah.
Yeah, Major League Baseball's intent is to be central to all of the baseball in the United States, from Little League to the big leagues, and including things like USA Baseball. How you feel about that probably is driven by a variety of factors, but is most most highly correlated with your general feeling about the commissioner would be my guess. You know, and it's ambitious, and I understand the intent. Their belief is that their people can make the greatest impact of anyone on the game. Whether or not they prove to be correct, we'll find out.
So Scott, talking about ownership, what's the female participation in minor league baseball's ownership circles, given
Yeah,
this?
good question.
Wow. I don't know the answer to that, Leslie. I truly don't. I knew the ownership groups that I worked for, and didn't spend a ton of time getting to know what the rest of the landscape looked like. But I think it would be safe to say that it would be reflective of a lot of capital markets, and particularly around sports. So predominantly.
That's sadly what I figured, but given the one
Sadly.
baseball concept, I'm kind of curious to see if they're going to take the lead. We need to see that incorporated.
Yeah,
Or-
you know, and ownership, you know, at the same time, ownership's tricky because someone's got to sell too. And you run into a lot of limited sale opportunities. There's been a lot of parent clubs that have put equity into their affiliates in this transition. The Saints are an example. The Twins became an equity partner in owning part of the Saints moving forward. And so I think, unfortunately, the more likely scenario is that we see fewer, because a lot of the dollars inside of ownership moving forward will probably be driven by the parent club.
Thank you.
And what happened, the 43 franchises that no longer exist as minor league affiliates, what happened to those?
Yeah, so some of them are now part of independent leagues. Some of them are part of Collegiate Woodbat. There's a Futures League, which is a draft league that some of the teams went into that's run by Major League Baseball. Some of them don't have a home. So the team in California that was eliminated, which was the Lancaster Jethawks, I don't believe that they have a league to play in for this season. Could be wrong. I haven't checked in on their situation lately. Jackson Generals in Jackson, Tennessee, they didn't have a natural travel partner to join up with as a league in their location. So my understanding is they've essentially ceased operations as well. So many of the markets still have baseball of some kind, but not all. All right, we're running up on time here, so I'll mention a couple of things. In your inbox tomorrow, you will receive an email with details around the Summer of SABR Golden Celebration Series. If you've been hiding under a rock, it's our 50th year this year. So we're going to celebrate that with a bunch of cool virtual programming, 1 weekend a month in June, July, and August. The July weekend will be the Jerry Malloy Negro League Conference. So if you've never had the opportunity to go to that event in person, please do check that out virtually, because it's a very, very unique thing and something that SABR should be very proud of. Along with that, expect really great panelists, really informative research, which you should expect from us. And we will be, like I said, that email will hit your inbox tomorrow morning. What I miss, Marlene?
You missed your partnership with IWBC for the Women in Baseball Conference out in Rockford.
Right. I was just sending a note to Les.
So September 10 through 12.
That's coming.
September 10 through 12, our women's baseball conference that we put on in conjunction with the International Women's Baseball Center. You can check out as well. That information will go out this summer, probably next month, probably June, I would suspect. And you'll be able to do that virtually. Or if you're really excited about it, you can travel to Rockford and come hang out with me and Leslie at a minimum. So we'll be doing that. And then I know the 19th Century crew is also working on a 19th Century symposium for November, which should be great as well, because they enjoyed their usual conference so much that they immediately started planning a second. So they must have had a lot of overflow energy.
And the Future 50 campaign, Scott, did that matching grant get matched? And there's still time to contribute, right?
We sent there was a note, I believe, this morning from Tom Hufford, one of our founding
Yes.
members. We are just about 80% to our goal for this campaign. I've got 1 second. This is the little bat mug that you get if you're one of the top donors. So if you're so inclined and if you've got space on the shelf, I know Zach said he's completely out of shelf space at this point. So maybe he's not a prospect for this, but go ahead and check it out if you're so inclined.
I think I can make room on my shelf for something that cool.
What's great is it's legitimately burned into the wood. Like, it's got the great smell. It's awesome.
Right.
Well, very good. Scott, we really appreciate you spending your evening with us and informing us about the reorganization and changes in the minor leagues, and then obviously all the SABR initiatives. You're doing a great job, and we're lucky to have you there at the leadership of SABR, and we really appreciate you spending your evening with us.
Appreciate all of
Thank
you.
you very much.
Hope to see you all this summer.
And we love your
All right,
segment on
absolutely.
the podcast too. with
And
Ryan.
then, folks, don't forget June 1st, Tuesday, June 1st for Steve and discussing 40 Years a Giant, the book on Horace Stoneham. And then the following Saturday, we'll have Lincoln Mitchell discussing the Giants in their city, which is the subsequent Bob Larry years of the Giants. So a giant heavy June, and let's hope my Giants can keep a good record through June. They usually have that June swoon, but I got my fingers and toes crossed, so we'll see what happens. So thanks everybody. Have a great night.
What
to
time
see
are
you.
the, I know the Saturday, June 5th thing is at 10 a.m.?
Yeah, so the Lincoln's is 10. That's the Saturday. It's 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on that Saturday, the June 5th. And Steve's is Tuesday, the 1st at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And
Okay.
I will be sending out that information to everybody on the
Program.
email list, and then also anybody who has
Okay.
signed up for the groups through the SABR website as well. Well, thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
a
everybody.
great
I
night,
can't wait
everybody.
to see you in person.
Yes,
Thanks.
me too, Marlene.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you for
Thanks.
joining us, Perry, and staying up late.
All right.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
Scott. Thank you, everybody.
Good to see you.